broadcasting live from the Business Radio X studios in Houston, Texas. It's time for Houston Business Radio. Now, here's your host.
Hello, Houston. Trisha Stetzel here, bringing you another episode of Houston Business Radio. It is my pleasure to introduce you to my new friend, and he might be a good golfer. Maybe. We might get into that later. Henry Woodman, who is the executive producer for Anemoya Media. Henry, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Happy to be here. And no, not a good golfer.
Not a good golfer.
Yeah, that's not a strong player.
This is how we met, right? You guys have to go out and look at his social media. You'll know exactly what I was talking about. Henry, welcome to the show. I'm so glad that you're here today. Would you tell my listeners a little bit more about who Henry is?
Yeah, it's funny because now when you look back as you get older and you go, okay, what defines me? And I think to summarize it, it's probably a hedonistic and opportunistic entrepreneur, which basically means I do stuff that I enjoy and that I think I would like, and I try to take advantage of opportunities that might have presented themselves, right? So it's not like I look at my life and I go, okay, here's the vision. I'm going to end up and I'm going to run a tech company. That was never a thought in my mind, and it ended up happening. It's just an opportunity.
It's just how it worked. So tell us a little bit more about Anemoya Media and what project you're working on right now.
Got it. So Anemoya Media really is an LLC. It's a vehicle to produce a series for streaming from a book that I published about 6 months ago. And the reason for creating the LLC, obviously legal protections, and you end up using that vehicle in order to drive the production forward. Now, we're just in the development phase, which is a whole nother challenge. And I wouldn't recommend anybody get into the film or television business unless they want to kill themselves and torture everything in their body. But that's just me, right? It's only because I could, and it was something I dreamed of 40 years ago. Now I'm going full circle.
Yeah. Can we talk about the book? Would that be okay?
We can talk about anything you want.
Let's do it. Tell me about the book.
So the book is called The Reincarnation of Marie, and it really is about a guy who believes he has found his soulmate with one problem. She died 70 years earlier. And it's based on reality. There was a woman in the late 1800s named Marie Barkerseff, and she had written a journal from 14 to 24. She died of tuberculosis at 24. 2 years after her death, the book or the journal that she was writing was published, and it became a huge international bestseller. It was talking about things that at the time women didn't talk about, right? Sexuality and masturbation and nudity and things like that. It's like, oh my God. It was somewhat scandalous. And so, 70 years later, somebody picks up the book, reads it, and slowly finds himself falling in love with the author, Marie. Visits her tomb, visits her places, and then realizes, oh my God, I've lost my mind. I have fallen in love with a dead woman, right? And finds her reincarnation. And that's kind of the gestation of the story.
Okay. Very interesting. And I think we should dig into Henry a little more because I know a little bit more about you than what you spoke here. You have a very vast background. So can you just give us a taste of some of the things that you've done in your lifetime?
Well, the reality is I did, like I said, the hedonistic route. For example, at 13, I'm in junior high, and this is 1973. So, I go to Mexico for a swimming meet. I was a swimmer. I come back because I bought a switchblade. I thought it was really cool, right? And I'm showing off this switchblade in junior high. Again, 1973, you could do this stuff, right?
Right.
And so the kids loved it. And I thought, oh, God. So I got a ticket to go back to Mexico City, bought a couple of boxes of switchblades, came back to junior high and sold them to be the cool kid in, junior high to my friends for a huge markup, right? And they all bought it. And that was kind of the first endeavor. And then, doing pet portraits and then, video games and laundromats, and ended up moving to Los Angeles after college thinking, I want to get into the film and television business. That did not happen, even though I bought the rights to the book I just mentioned. ended up getting on a travel film crew as a PA, what's called a production assistant. After 10 years, worked my way up to producing travel films. And eventually, one of the places we were producing films was in Chile in Latin America, and realized that had gone from Pinochet's dictatorship to a democracy. So I thought, opportunity, new television station, need for programming. I fly down and I meet with the production company I worked with in Chile, and I then set up a meeting at the new television network to pitch a show idea that I ripped off from a US show, by the way. And 2 months later, we're on the air with the show, right? So I'm producing game shows in Chile now and commercials and other things. And in Chile, somebody gives me a CD-ROM. We're going to go to this full circle. It gives me a CD-ROM, and it has a 360-degree virtual tour. And from a guy who used to produce travel films and then sit at a computer and look up and down and all around, that was the coolest thing ever, right?
Yeah.
I am now going to go out and produce virtual tours so I don't have to travel with 5 guys and 17 pieces of luggage, right? So I set up another company to do World Travelvision, which essentially is doing virtual tours for destinations and hotels. So then, a couple of years into this is now the mid to late 90s, they say, how do we get these virtual tours on this new World Wide Web thingy? I'm like, I don't know, send them a CD-ROM, because that's what I gave them to go to the trade shows and the conferences. And eventually I went, okay, let me look into it and see what I can do to help. One thing led to another. We went from virtual tour production to virtual tour distribution, realizing, photos is a bigger problem, because those old systems that would give you the rate and availability for the travel sites never had pictures. Well, for the travel agencies, the brick and mortars, never had pictures. Go to the internet and it said no photos available early on when you were dialing up with AOL, right? For those that are old enough to remember this.
You've got mail.
Yeah. And so then I realized, okay, so here's another problem. Pictures are an issue, right? And so because I was delivering virtual tours with these links, I could figure out. So we were an overnight success after 25 years of, struggling and learning on the way. And that was the business that I sold a few years ago called, IcePortal. So if you go to any travel website and you see pictures of any hotel, the Hiltons, the Hyatts, the Wyndhams, the Best Westerns, the Accors of the world, that would have come through our servers. We would collect from their database, size, tag, categorize, and send it to every travel site on the planet.
Wow.
I didn't even breathe.
I know. And we talked about this before we started recording, but I think it's appropriate to ask the question here, which is you must have been in the right place at the right time for all of these things to come together. Yeah, you hear that a lot.
Yeah, and I tell people, I said, listen, I've been in the right place at the wrong time. I've been in the wrong place at the right time most of my life. And every now and then, because you're always out there and you're networking, you stumble your way into the right place at the right time. Had I not been in Chile and somebody giving me a CD-ROM, had I not been producing travel films and know what that industry looks like, had I not been fascinated with this new computer thing and then got into virtual tours, had I not been asked by hotels, hey, can you deliver this to this new medium, the internet? And then I look into that. Had I not seen, hey, there's a bigger problem, the nice to have is virtual tours, the need to have is pictures, right? And so it's not a matter of I just happen to sit there and go, hey, pictures is a problem. I have no idea, unless I happen to be sort of stepping my way through this and then, oh, there's an opportunity. Oh, and oh yeah, that could use, oh, here's a problem. So I didn't really say I found myself in the right place. I just happened to find myself in a lot of places at a lot of times, and they were right very few times. I mean, very rarely was I right, because the path that I wanted to take didn't ever happen. So I ended up following whatever opportunities presented themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, for those of you who don't know what a CD-ROM is, I'm going to say Google it, and then I'm going to sound old. Go ask your chatbot, right? I don't know.
True, true.
It's true. All right. So you've had lots of experience in starting businesses. What is it that you actually look for when starting a business?
Well, the reality is the real business was the last one. Everything else was sort of hedonistically and opportunistically. Because when I look at starting a business, it's generally, what is the problem, right?
Mhm,
And what problem am I solving?
mhm.
And is it really a problem, right? It's not, oh, yeah, it would be nice. I really like clothing. I want to open up a boutique store in downtown. Okay, is that a problem? Ah, I don't think so, but I could be wrong. So the reality is, what's the issue? And do I have expertise to know about it? And sometimes the expertise isn't even worth it, because a lot of people that are trying to solve a problem find the problem from the outside. They're not on the inside, because if you're on the inside, you're just like, that's just the way it is. That's the way we've been doing it forever, right? Um, Nowadays, I think that the opportunities are everywhere and everyone's trying to find them. But if you find your way into a certain industry, like I know nothing about certain industries, and then when I get into it, I'm like, wow, that's pretty dysfunctional. How do they even survive? You don't know those things until you find your way into that. So I'd just say, what problem are you solving, or what problem is it? And is it an opportunity?
Yeah. So, Henry, if somebody's listening right now and they're like, oh gosh, well, I created this solution in a vacuum and I'm putting it out there and nobody's buying it, what would you tell them?
I in full disclosure, I've been an angel investor. I've invested in 46 companies, and now I'm kind of like, oh my God, the biggest challenge by far is not creating this cool product. It's letting the world know it exists, right? It's one problem to say, listen, I have this really cool thing. There are millions of people that would love it. Okay. How do the Trishas and the millions of other people in the world know this product exists? Lots of time, effort, and money, and multiple beating over the head and saying, hey, we got this product. Hey, we got this product. One of the advantages too is, can you do it as an enterprise? So you don't have to sell individuals. You don't have to deal with the customer. You can go B2B, business to business, and let them deal with their customers, right?
Yeah.
So the hardest thing for any startup, in my opinion, is not building the technology. Anybody can do that, or creating this or whatever widget they want to do. It's the marketing element of it. And
Mm.
even now, everybody's like, well, social media. Yeah, everybody's doing so. Oh, influence. Yeah, everybody's doing influence. I don't even have the answer to that, except it's really hard.
It is. And especially if you're a solopreneur, or you have a small business or a medium business, you don't have a team of people that can get out there and do it for you. So it's something you feel like you have to take on yourself. And well, if you're not an expert at marketing, you're not an expert at marketing. That's just the bottom line, right? You mentioned when I asked you about what you look for in starting a business, that your last one was really the true business. So what would you do differently with that last business?
Well, when I started the business, I really didn't have a good understanding of the basic needs of a business. When they'd say things like, hey, you need to hire the best people, and I'm like, yeah, I can't even afford myself. I don't know what that means, right? Or you need KPIs. And I'm like, yeah, what's a KPI, right? I had no idea. You need a vision. I want to make money, right? So the reality is, I ended up, somebody, like years into the business, somebody handed me a book called Traction by Gino Wickman. And all of a sudden, it was like the light
Yeah.
bulb went off. It's essentially, it was my Bible. Gino Wickman, the author, I even texted him and I said, listen, our backdoor password to our technology was your name, because you essentially helped us create the structure and the processes around the business. When we didn't know what a vision was, you clarified what that meant, what KPIs, what the scorecard looked like, what does it mean to have a culture, how do you build a culture. He does pretty much everything you need to know to run a business, with the exception of marketing. He talks about it, but there's no clear cut way to market a product. And there's so many different ways for the different products, whether it's a service or a widget or a what have you. But that was my Bible. And I made everybody in the company read it, and every new employee had to read it. And that was kind of our Bible.
I love that. And great book, by the way, great suggestion. So, Henry, if people are already interested in having a conversation with you or at least connecting with you, what's the best way to find you?
I think the best is, speaking of the book that we talked about earlier, it's called mariethestory.com.
Mm.
And on there, there's information about me, and then there's a way to connect. There's even Facebook and Instagram links on that page as well.
Perfect. mariethestory.com. Yeah.
You got
I'll
it.
mention that again. I'll also put that in the show notes for those of you who are listening from your computer. You can just point and click. Otherwise, you just have to remember it, and it's very easy. mariethestory.com. Awesome. All right. So you already talked about your favorite book. Is there any other book that's really been instrumental to you in the business space besides Traction?
You know, I've read a lot of business books, the hiring, they had grit, they had, I mean, the reality was things like mindset. It's not so much a business book, but a focus on discipline and, how you focus your mind. The reality for me was, and I've read Scaling Up and I've read a bunch of others that are similar conceptually to Traction. What Traction does, at least for me, for a small business at the time, was clearly articulate what exactly these things mean and how to put rubber to the road, which is what Traction stands for, where rubber meets the road. So in my opinion, Traction was that's all I really needed.
Yeah. All right. Confirmation. Traction's the book. I love it.
You're welcome, Gino.
All right. This may be controversial, Henry. Can anyone start and run a business?
Well, anyone can, but not everybody is going to succeed.
Yeah.
In my opinion, there is a marketing glamour about, I got my own business, I just make my own hours, I'll make a ton of money. And wow, the first, I'm going to say decade or so in the last business, I made less than I was making before. It's not like it was, fairy tales and rainbows and unicorns. It was a lot of effort. I was the first one in. I was the last one out. If there was money left over, God forbid, I might be able to pay myself. I mortgaged my home, or I got a second mortgage to pay the employees when I couldn't make it. So, and even starting a business, people won't take it seriously because they're like, okay, you just started. I don't know if you're going to be around in a year or two. So, call me then and see how we're doing, because I'm not going to bet on something. Now, widgets and other things are different, but what I was into, service, software services, was a little bit different. We had to interconnect with like Hilton and Hyatt. These are big companies. I don't take it. You got to be serious. Got to be hanging around a while. So I think anybody can start, but if I look back and think, oh wow, as somebody would have said 90% of small businesses fail within the first 5 years, I probably would have said, what? You know what? Let me see if I can buy a business or do something that already has established client base and has an established process and procedures. And, somebody wants to exit and I want to be able to do that. I didn't think I didn't know enough to know that I couldn't, right? So I think that's a good thing. I just think that nowadays with AI and stuff, you can get a lot more information a lot faster.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think that your story probably resonates with a lot of listeners too. First one in, last one out, trying to make payroll. What does that look like? This is really hard. I'm 5 years in. Why isn't this any better than it was before? What would you say to those people that are in that, 5 to 8 year struggle right now where they haven't quite turned the corner? They built their business and they're almost able to pay themselves, or maybe they could pay themselves if they keep putting money back into the business. What would you say to them right now?
It's kind of like, and you hear these stories like, oh, it was like the darkest before the light, or I was on the verge of throwing in the towel and, it turned the corner. Yeah, we all say that, right? And so I think luck plays a part in this, but the reality is it's a matter of wash, rinse, repeat, do it again, wash, rinse, repeat, do it again. Starting a business is really about discipline and consistency, meaning set up the procedures and the process. And if you know anything about lean management and Kaizen, how to make it more efficient. how to use more with less, how to essentially create and do, whether it's marketing or sales or whatever it is that you're doing, without having to go overboard. And I honestly believe if I knew how to raise money at the time, I probably would have. And I would have spent it all on stupid things and I would have bankrupted the business. True story. The fact that I had to bootstrap my way and learn how to overcome the hurdles in the mountains, I think looking back might have been helpful. And the fact that I hung around long enough and I kept plugging away and networking, I think in the end was helpful. So not everything will work out, but if you really believe and keep trying, and I didn't have an option B, it was like either this or I, ask you if you want fries with that burger, right? That were my two options, right? So that was my motivation. I can't fail because I don't know what I would do. And I would just keep plugging away and calling and making the calls.
Yeah, absolutely. And you got to get up and go to work every day. I talk to a lot of business owners that are just waiting for the phone to ring, and it doesn't work that way in most industries. I don't want to qualify all of them in the same space, but the phone's not just going to ring without some work. Yeah.
And I'll give you an example. When we started the company, we were essentially a photography company doing virtual tours, right? Then we did virtual tours and distribution, and then we wanted to get into photos. So what we did is we called the conferences that catered to hotel and hotel distribution. We said, listen, we'll provide you guys with the photography of the event. We'll send one of our photographers because guys on staff, right? You essentially pay for the hotel and the ticketing and the entries and everything, and we'll take care of the photography, which costs us really nothing more than what was already on our salary. So we got free entry to the thing. We got free hotel. All we had to do was go to the conference, shoot the pictures. So for us, it put our name out there. They gave us a booth, right? So our name was there, and they'd see us here. And then I'd talk to the principals, and they'd go, okay, so he's still here. Yeah, okay, we should take us. What. So it was just a matter of keep plugging away, get
Yeah.
creative.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes it's just 3 feet from gold, right? And it's not meant for everybody. But if you believe that you have the solution to the problem and not just putting something out there and hoping, praying that someone will call you, let me cross my fingers, right? But you actually have a solution to the problem that your audience has, it will happen. It will. And we learn from our mistakes, for gosh sakes.
Oh my God, I
All
should
of
be a
them.
genius.
All right, Henry, what's next for you?
Well, the next is, from the book being published and NMY Media, we're developing a series called Slippin', which is kind of a play on the word slipping through time. So it's either the reincarnation that I was talking about, the reincarnation of Marie, or he is going into a quantum universe, or there's another him in another part, and he meets it, or he's making all this up as a figment of his imagination. He's hallucinating this whole thing. We don't answer those questions, but the series goes through a bunch of, let's call it trippy, sort of psychedelic type
Hey.
experiences of, I fell in love with this woman. Is she coming back? Is there such a thing as reincarnation? Is another? Oh my God, right? So that's the series.
I love that. That's fantastic. All right. So we've probably piqued some more interest there, and sending people to mariethestory.com is where they need to go. They can connect with you there. Second, they can learn more about Marie and where the story might be going. We don't know yet. That is very interesting. All right. I'm in. So, Henry, as we get to the back end of our conversation, what's one story that you'd like to share about something that's happened to you or maybe somebody that you've worked with that might just give us a gift before we part ways today?
So I'll leave it with it's all about me, me, me. So I in college, this is the early days, and I was in college in 1979. I was a sophomore, and I'm addicted to a video game called Pac-Man. Probably know this, right? I mean, I had calluses on my thumb and forefinger. So there I am in Tucson, Arizona, University of Arizona, and I'm sitting in a laundromat, and I have a pocket full of quarters, and I want to play Pac-Man, and I don't want to study. And I'm thinking, man, this place needs a Pac-Man. And so I go back to my dorm room. I call every laundromat in Tucson. And I said, guys have video game machines? And they all said no. And eventually I'd say, would you like one? And, we'll share the revenue. And a couple said yes. Now I had no money, but I took my tuition money. I went to an auction because, they had these video games at these malls, and the ones in the
Yeah.
back, nobody played. They'd sell them at an auction just to get them off their
Right.
books. So I bought one. I put it in a laundromat. It did really well. A couple months later, I put it in another laundromat. So by the time I graduated college, I had video games in many of the laundromats around Tucson because people were a captive audience. And I never even solved my own problem because I would go in to get the machine and try to play, and somebody was playing it, and I can't essentially, take money out of my pocket to play the game for free. And so that was kind of the story of fulfilling a hedonistic and opportunistic need in my life as a
Yeah.
college.
Yeah, and it wasn't the laundromat's challenge, it was your own, right? It was your challenge. You wanted to fill that void. I love that. Henry, this has been so much fun. Thank you for coming on the show with me today.
Thank you, Trisha.
Yeah, you're very welcome. All right, folks, the information will be in the show notes. All you have to do is point and click. If you're just listening, you can remember mariethisstory.com. Go and connect with Henry. By the way, we didn't even talk about half of the things that he's done. Very interesting guy. Should go out and at least, find out where he's at and ask him to play golf. I'm just saying. I'm just
Hey, if you want to beat me, play golf, man. That's an easy one.
If you want to win, play
Yeah.
golf with Henry. That's all.
I'll let you win.
Yeah, beautiful. All right. Henry Woodman, executive producer, Anamoya Media, mariethisstory.com. Thank you for being here with me. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
It's all the time we have for today's show. Join us next time for another exciting episode of Houston Business Radio. Until then, stay tuned, stay inspired, and keep thriving in the Houston business community.